Welcome to vpod.ai. I'm your host, Mike.
And I'm Susan, thrilled to be here with you.
You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today.
Absolutely, it's a great opportunity.
Okay, so welcome back. What if I told you that the type of cancer diagnosed the most often in the United States isn't even close to being the deadliest?
Yeah, that always shocks people.
Right. Today, we are looking directly at you, the listener, because, well, our mission touches literally everyone in some way. We're mapping out the 2025 landscape of the most common cancer types in the U.S.
Excluding non-melanoma skin cancers, just to be clear.
Exactly. We have a massive amount of newly projected data, and the goal is just to, make sense of it all.
And I want to set the table right away because hearing that we are spending the next chunk of time talking about cancer statistics might trigger an immediate urge to fast forward.
Oh, for sure. It sounds super heavy.
It does. But the goal today is absolutely not to overwhelm you with a list of scary, intimidating numbers. Instead, we are going to use this data as a highly practical roadmap.
I like that. A roadmap.
Yeah, because when you actually understand the mechanisms of these diseases and where the biggest statistical risks lie, the whole landscape becomes much less terrifying.
It's like turning on the lights in a dark room.
Right. It transforms from the shadowy, unknown threat into a concrete set of priorities for your own personal health.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at your notes, the sheer volume we are talking about at the very top of this list is, frankly, staggering.
It really is.
Just looking at the 2025 estimates, if we take just the four most common types, breast, prostate, lung, and colorectal, those four alone are expected to exceed 1 million new cases combined.
Yeah, over 1 million.
Over 1 million. My immediate assumption when seeing a number that massive is that, these four specific diseases must be accelerating. Like, are we looking at a sudden explosion in growth rates for these four? Is something entirely new triggering them?
Actually, that's a very common misconception, but it's not quite what the data is telling us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not that these four are suddenly exploding in their growth rate compared to, say, a decade ago. It's that they hold an absolute enduring monopoly on volume.
A monopoly.
Exactly. And to understand why, you have to look at the biology of the human body. Think about what these four areas, the breasts, the prostate, the lungs, and the colon, have in common.
Okay.
They are all made of highly active tissues that are either constantly influenced by shifting hormones, or they're constantly exposed to external environments and processing waste.
Oh, wow. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So breast and prostate tissue are constantly responding to estrogen and testosterone.
Right.
And the lungs and colon are basically the body's main processing plants for everything we take in from the outside world.
Precisely. You see, every time a cell divides, there is a tiny risk of a copying error, a mutation. So tissues that are constantly regenerating or dealing with environmental toxins, like, the 20,000 breaths of outside air we take every day, they simply have more opportunities to make a cellular mistake.
It's just a numbers game, really.
That biological reality is exactly what drives the sheer volume.
People often view cancer as this vast, incredibly fragmented landscape of hundreds of different rare, unpredictable diseases.
Yes, they do.
But based on what you're saying, it's actually more like a corporate monopoly. You have a tiny handful of these massive major players that completely dominate the board.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a monopoly that dictates almost the entire global response.
Oh, so?
Well, when you realize that over 1 million cases are concentrated in just 4 specific areas, it provides a surprisingly clear focal point. The vast majority of medical research, funding, and public health initiatives are laser-focused on these specific players.
Which is actually kind of reassuring, honestly.
It is. For you, the individual, it means you don't have to be on high alert for 100 different obscure threats. The medical community knows exactly who the biggest enemies are, and that dictates where we deploy our best screening technologies.
And that leads us right into how these numbers break down across the population, because the division isn't equal at all. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you look at women, over 50% of all new diagnoses fall into just 3 categories: breast, lung, and colorectal. And for men, it's a remarkably similar story. Almost half of new diagnoses for men are wrapped up in their top 3: prostate, lung, and colorectal.
The overlap is pretty striking.
It's fascinating. Lung and colorectal are these shared universal enemies. Meanwhile, breast cancer is the massive gender-specific leader for women, approaching a third of a million cases this year.
Yeah, exactly. 319,750 estimated cases.
Right. And prostate cancer is the overwhelming leader for men, sitting right behind it with 313,780 estimated cases. So how should an individual interpret the fact that essentially half of their risk profile is tied up in merely three specific types?
Honestly, I think it highlights the empowering side of this statistic.
Empowering.
Yeah, because it fundamentally changes the math of your worry from a vague dread to a targeted action plan.
That makes sense.
If almost half the battle is concentrated in just three highly researched, highly understood areas, you have a fortress you can actively defend. It removes so much of the unknown from the equation.
I'll admit, even looking at these lists initially gave me a bit of panic. Just the word itself carries so much weight.
Of course it does. But you aren't going to the doctor to be screened for everything under the sun. You are going to address the top three statistical probabilities.
So we're talking about things like colonoscopies and mammograms.
Okay.
But what about prostate cancer? You hear a lot about PSA tests, but I've always been a bit fuzzy on what that actually means. Are they, like, looking for the cancer cells themselves in the blood?
That's a great question, and it's a distinction a lot of people miss. PSA stands for prostate-specific antigen. It's a protein produced by both normal and cancerous tissue in the prostate gland.
Okay.
So the test isn't looking for the cancer cells floating in the blood. It's looking for elevated levels of this protein. Think of it like checking the exhaust fumes of an engine.
Ah, I see.
If the engine is revving way too hard, producing too much exhaust, it indicates there might be a major malfunction under the hood. It's an early warning system.
I love that analogy. So a high PSA isn't necessarily a diagnosis, it's just the check engine light turning on.
Exactly. And because breast, prostate, lung, and colorectal cancers are so common, they are the areas where we have developed the most robust early warning systems.
Right.
The concentration of the disease has led directly to the concentration of our medical defenses.
But those defenses definitely don't yield the same results across the board. Which brings us back to the paradox I mentioned at the very beginning.
The mortality rates.
Yes. We've been talking about the number of diagnoses, but when you look at the estimated number of deaths, it completely flips the script.
It really does.
Well, let's look at the proportions.
Right.
Lung cancer has somewhere around 226,650 expected cases. That's significantly fewer cases than breast and prostate.
Right.
But the deaths, we're looking at a staggering 124,730 deaths expected from lung cancer.
The contrast is just jarring, isn't it?
Jarring doesn't even cover it. Compare that to prostate cancer, which has well over 300,000 cases for roughly 35,770 deaths.
Yeah.
Or breast cancer, again with nearly a third of a million cases, 319,750, but around 42,680 deaths.
And colon and rectal cancers are sitting at 154,270 cases, with about 52,900 deaths.
Exactly. So it seems to me that high-case cancers like prostate and breast are functioning like a blaring alarm. They're incredibly common, the alarm rings constantly, but they're highly survivable. Lung cancer, on the other hand, seems to operate more like a silent thief. It has fewer overall cases, but it's taking vastly more lives. Why the massive discrepancy? Are lung cancer cells just inherently more aggressive?
What's fascinating here is that they aren't necessarily more invincible. Your silent thief analogy is spot on, but to understand why, we have to look at the underlying biology and the physical real estate of where these diseases develop.
Okay, the physical real estate.
Right. We cannot judge the threat of a disease purely by its rank in sheer volume. The data clearly shows that while breast and prostate cancers lead the pack in volume, lung cancer remains the dominant challenge for mortality. And the reason is structural.
Structural. How so?
Breast and prostate cancers develop in localized glandular tissue. These abnormalities can often be physically felt during an exam.
Meaning they form distinct lumps or physical changes that you can actually detect?
Yes. Or easily detected through those routine screenings we just talked about. We hear the blaring alarm early because the fire is happening in a small, relatively contained, and closely monitored room.
That makes total sense.
The lungs, however, are completely different. They are massive, spongy organs encased deep inside your ribcage. And here's the kicker. The lung tissue itself has almost no pain receptors.
Wait, really? No pain receptors inside the lung itself?
Very, very few. So a tumor can grow in the periphery of a lung for a very long time, pushing that spongy tissue aside completely silently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, without causing a cough or any localized pain.
So by the time the alarm rings,
Exactly. By the time the tumor has grown large enough to press against an airway or the chest wall and actually cause symptoms, the thief has already emptied the vault. The disease has often advanced to a stage where it is spread and is much harder to treat.
that structural difference is huge. It's a perfect hiding spot. They get a massive head start simply because there's room to grow without tripping any wires.
Precisely.
Which I imagine is exactly why there was such a big push for early low-dose CT scans for people with a history of smoking. We're basically trying to put a security camera inside the vault.
That is exactly the protocol. A low-dose CT scan takes highly detailed images of those deep, spongy areas to catch the thief before it causes a single symptom.
That's incredible.
It highlights why personalized risk assessment with your doctor is so critical. You have to know which type of threat you are specifically facing based on your age, your gender, and your history.
Absolutely. So I want to follow that thread into the second tier of this top 10 list because, frankly, looking at the data for numbers 5 through 10, I'm genuinely confused by some of the mortality rates.
Let's look at them.
So we move past the big four, and we get into cancers like melanoma, which has 104,960 cases and 8,430 deaths.
Right.
Then bladder at 84,870 cases and 17,420 deaths. Kidney at 80,980 cases and 14,510 deaths.
And endometrial cancer is at 69,120 cases with 13,860 deaths.
Right. But then you look at non-Hodgkin lymphoma with 80,350 cases and 19,390 deaths. And finally, you drop down to the bottom of the top 10 list and you find leukemia.
Number 10.
Yeah, it has the lowest number of cases in this group, around 66,890. Yet the death toll for leukemia is 23,540. That's nearly triple that of melanoma.
It's a huge jump.
If there are fewer cases, why is it so much harder to survive?
This raises an important question, and it comes down to a fundamental division in oncology: solid tumors versus systemic blood cancers.
Okay, solid versus systemic.
As we move down this list, we start seeing a mix of both. Melanoma, kidney, bladder, and endometrial cancers, these are solid tumors. If a surgeon can identify a localized tumor in the kidney early enough, they can often surgically remove the threat entirely.
Because the problem is physically contained in one organ.
Exactly. But leukemia and non-Hodgkin lymphoma are blood cancers.
So it's not a lump you can just point to on an MRI and cut out.
Right. They originate in the bone marrow, the lymphatic system, the very blood that circulates through every inch of your body.
Oh, I see.
From the moment the first abnormal cell develops, the disease is, by definition, systemic. It's everywhere all at once. You can't perform surgery on the bloodstream.
Let me see if I can visualize this. It's the difference between like a fire in the kitchen that you can isolate and put out with an extinguisher versus a contaminant in the actual plumbing system of the house.
Oh, that's gold.
Because the contaminant is already everywhere the water flows.
That is a perfect visualization. And that complexity inherently raises the stakes and the mortality rate. You have to treat the entire house's water supply without destroying the pipes.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. That is why leukemia, despite having fewer overall cases than something like melanoma or kidney cancer, results in a significantly higher mortality rate.
But if you can't surgically remove it, how do you even fight a plumbing issue like that? We hear about chemotherapy, sure, but you mentioned earlier that there are new ways we are targeting these systemic issues.
This is where the science gets truly incredible. We are moving beyond just flooding the plumbing system with harsh chemicals. We are seeing massive advancements in targeted immunotherapies and CRT cell therapies specifically designed to hunt down systemic blood cancers.
CAR T-cell therapy. I've seen that term in the news, but usually surrounded by so much medical jargon, it's impossible to decipher.
It can be dense.
How does it actually work?
Let's stick with your plumbing analogy. T cells are the natural soldiers of your immune system. They patrol the pipes looking for infections.
Okay.
But sometimes cancer cells are really good at disguising themselves as normal, healthy cells, so the soldiers just float right past them.
Sneaky.
Very. So in CAR T-cell therapy, doctors essentially extract some of your own T cells from your blood. In a lab, they genetically engineer them. They basically hand these soldiers a highly specific mugshot of the cancer cells.
Wow.
Yeah, they add a special receptor called a chimeric antigen receptor, or QRR.
So they upgrade the soldiers and then just put them back into the bloodstream.
Exactly. Millions of these upgraded, hyper-focused T cells are infused back into the patient's plumbing system. They now have the specific equipment needed to recognize the disguise, latch onto the cancer cells, and destroy them.
That is absolutely wild.
We are effectively teaching the body's own plumbing system to actively filter and clean itself of the contaminant. It is a game changer for blood cancers that were previously considered untreatable.
The idea that we can extract a cell, give it a new set of instructions, and send it back in to do the job, it honestly shifts the entire tone of this conversation for me.
I agree, and it's vital that we don't let the big four monopolies overshadow the second tier.
Right.
The mega monopolies at the top take up most of the public awareness campaigns and the colored ribbons, but these tier 2 diseases represent tens of thousands of lives. The research happening here, like the SAR T-cell therapies, often paves the way for breakthroughs across the entire spectrum of oncology.
So what does this all mean? We started this journey looking at an ocean of numbers projected for 2025. Over 1 million cases in just 4 main categories.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We've talked about the shared risks, the gender divides, and those shocking mortality rates driven by the sneaky biology of organs like the lungs. But stepping back, the takeaway here isn't fear at all. The takeaway is clarity.
Absolutely. Clarity is power.
This data strips away the mystery. If you know that half of your statistical risk is sitting in just 3 specific diseases, you know exactly what to talk about at your next doctor's appointment.
Exactly. You don't have to be afraid of every single shadow.
Right. You know exactly which screenings to ask for: the mammograms, the colonoscopies, the PSA tests. You know what the check engine lights are.
Yes.
The data underscores the critical importance of understanding your personal health risks, your family history, and engaging with the ongoing research that is continually improving prevention, detection, and treatment options. You have the roadmap. Now it's just about driving carefully.
I think that's a perfect way to frame it. And I'd like to leave you with a final, forward-looking thought to ponder as we wrap up today.
Sure. What is it?
We've spent our time analyzing the projections for 2025. But if you consider everything we just discussed, if ongoing research continues to improve detection, if low-dose CT scans catch that silent thief earlier, and if we continue to see incredible leaps in genetic targeting and cellular therapies like CORE-RT, are we approaching a tipping point?
A tipping point.
Yeah. If ongoing research continues to improve detection and treatment, and we already know exactly which few diseases make up 50% of the statistical battle,
What?
are we approaching a tipping point where, in our lifetimes, these top-heavy statistics transform from widespread, lethal threats into highly manageable chronic conditions? Just how radically could targeted vigilance change these numbers by 2035?
Wow. It makes you think, doesn't it? Turns out beating the corporate monopoly of these major diseases isn't about hiding. It's about knowing exactly who the major players are, turning on the lights, and making sure that silent thief never gets a chance to pick the lock.
Well said.
Stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep asking the right questions at your next checkup. Thanks for listening.